Hi, I'm Suzanne. I am a videographer and photographer, and I am here because this month is International Women's Day on the 8th of March. In keeping with this year's theme of #ChooseToChallenge, I've been working with 9 brilliant women creating a photo series to represent different stereotypes that modern Australian women face. Alongside this photo series, we've recorded a conversation on each of these topics to help create a dialogue around them for International Women's Day. You're going to get one a day until the 9th of March, so stay tuned. Today's topic is choose to challenge sexuality, and when I say that, I'm talking about having a sexuality, not sexual preference. I have this conversation with the very well-informed Lara, as she is the owner and founder of Elixir Play. If you would like to see the photos of Lara, please head to my Instagram at suzanne.was.here.
Hi everyone, I am Lara Pack. I'm the founder of Elixir Play, which is a women's pleasure product company.
Which is awesome.
Thank you.
So, what we are going to talk about today is choosing to challenge sexuality. And obviously you're going to be a wonderful person to discuss this topic given your area of expertise. And I guess I just want to start with what you've experienced to be some of the main roadblocks and stereotypes that women deal with on the topic of sexuality.
There's so many, but I think one of the biggest things for me is like this difference between being overly sexual or not very sexual. And you're judged on either end of the spectrum. You can't just be who you are.
There's
you're
no gray.
either, exactly, there's no gray. So either you are not very sexual and you don't enjoy it and therefore you're judged for being a prude, or you're overtly sexual and you're comfortable in your sexuality and you're slut-shamed. And it's just not being able to find this balance of like, why can't we just be who we are? And whatever we're comfortable with, let's just go with that and celebrate that instead of this constant being brought down or being judged for wherever we are in between.
Yeah, and I think most people would obviously fall on the in-between.
Exactly.
As with any scale.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so what kind of issues have you come across in trying to introduce or make women comfortable with pleasure products?
Yeah, I mean, it's been honestly a huge challenge. I know we're talking about challenges, but I think when people ask me, it took me a really long time to get comfortable just outright saying, I make pleasure products for women. I used to try to find different ways, like, I create products, or I create things for women. Because what I found was a lot of people would be like, either, you do that, or cool, how did it start? Or it became very sexual. It became like, what kind of kinks are you into?
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. And so I couldn't really find this happy medium. And I feel like, I came from a place of wanting to help women who weren't enjoying sex and had experiences of painful sex like I had, and trying to normalize it. So it wasn't just this like, I'm going to design pleasure products. It was, it helped me and I wanted to help other women. And trying to get that message out in an industry that's overly sexualized has been really tough. To kind of find a voice and a space and feel comfortable to do it in the world that we live in. And I still get judged a lot of the time, and there's still lots of people that are like, why would you do that? And so you have 2 daughters, like, why would you do that when you have kids? And what kind of world are you setting them up for? And look, I have no doubt when they're teenagers, I'm going to embarrass them for a whole lot of reasons that most parents will. And this will just be one of them. Exactly.
I loved what you said about that in the past when you were asked, do you worry that they're going to be teased about this? And I think you said, basically, if what I am doing is going to create a future where things like this are more acceptable and more open, less shameful and better for women, then that's what I want to do, and it's worth it in the short term.
Exactly.
I love that, and I think it immediately reminded me of the very famous quote from Emma Watson of, if not now, when, if not me, who, is your own version of that.
It's probably a little bit of a high bar for me to reach out to.
No, but it's all the little steps, right? Like you don't eat an elephant all at once.
Exactly, and I think, when you believe in something, and lots of people ask, like starting this business and how did I do it? I'm like, it's one step at a time, and the next thing becomes the next thing. And I learn every day. I learn along the way. I make mistakes all the time. I fail. But in every failure, you learn a lesson, you pick up and do something. But I really want my kids to grow up in a world where pleasure is normal for women, where it's celebrated, where it's encouraged.
100%.
And whether we like it or not, we just don't live in that world right now. It's getting better, but we don't live in it right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was 100 years ago. I mean, still today in some countries, but 100 years ago in European countries, they were still doing surgery to prevent women from masturbating.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, it's not long ago enough.
Exactly.
That is not long ago enough.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a long way to go, but I'm curious from your perspective, what have you found when you're talking to women has helped with reducing shame or stigma around sexuality in general?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the biggest thing is literally just talking about it. I mean, we just don't, you know.
Yeah.
We sit in shame. We don't talk to our friends. You know, how good would it be if you went for coffee with your bestie and you sat there and you were like, oh, just didn't want to have sex last night, and your friend was like, I don't want to either, but I tried this one thing and it worked, and you know, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about? We don't have those kind of conversations. Or, hey, I'm finding sex really painful at the moment, and instead of living with it, the doctors were like, you know what, that's actually not normal. We could probably do a whole lot of things fine. I mean, it's normal in that it's experienced by a lot of people, but as in there's ways that we can fix it.
Society,
and there's lots of reasons why it might be painful, and that we could do things to help with. And so it's the same thing, and I reference this a lot, but I had a miscarriage, and it's the same thing I feel about miscarriage. We don't tell anyone we're pregnant until we're 12 weeks. And why do we not do that? Because the risk of miscarrying so high. But you know, when you have that miscarriage, it is so lonely. And for me, I felt let down. I felt like my body had let me down. I felt so much shame. But I happened to have been in a room when I was having my ultrasound with 3 women, 2 out of the 3 who'd had a miscarriage themselves.
And that support would have been...
And it was amazing, but I was like, you know, we don't talk about it. And so I think as women, we often, the expectations are so high for who we should be or want to be.
We should swallow anything unpleasant.
Exactly.
And
we don't talk.
Shameful.
And, you know, if we just had a normal conversation like you and I are having now, we'd probably help each other a lot, or at least we wouldn't be sitting in that world of like, this is just me.
Well, that's even what, I mean, I've come from a family of health professionals, even though that's not where I'm in. So I have very few boundaries.
Yes.
And I've realized that going into workplaces, and even just how much women are uncomfortable about talking about menstruation.
Yes.
And I'm like, there's so many things that I wouldn't have realized if I hadn't talked to other women about.
Completely.
And on that as well, something that I've discovered more and more women have a stigma around, which I think is quite interesting, is the use of lube.
Oh my gosh.
You should be expected to produce enough moisture. And I'm like, what kind of pressure? We don't put that much pressure on men to be able to go
exactly.
that much, but women have to.
It's like it's a banner, right? It's literally like we sit there and we're like, oh, I didn't have to use lube, or I was wet enough, or I did this. And it's like, I'm sorry, when did this happen, and why is it happening? And I totally agree. It's ridiculous, and it's so insane to me that we feel that way. But we're raised that way. Well, we're not even raised that way. We're not taught. Well, I certainly wasn't, and I love my mum. I'm sorry, Mum. But it wasn't like I was taught, like, go and have your own pleasure. And when you're having sex the first time, make sure it's about you and you enjoy it. It was like, make sure it's someone you love.
Yes.
And that they're going to take care of you, or they're going to look after you, and it's very special, and it's all about the other person.
Yes.
And there's no like, hey, if it's a bit painful, have you tried using some lube, because that might help.
Yeah.
And we just don't have these conversations. I totally agree.
Or even just the fact that the first time might not be fireworks and rainbows. And
this is why I loved Bridgerton.
Oh, yeah.
I'm obsessed with Bridgerton. But it's one of the reasons I loved it, because he's like, you know, this is going to hurt, talks through, and there's all these conversations about, like, it's not going to be amazing initially.
Yeah.
And we need to set that expectation, because otherwise, you know, your first experience has such an impact on how you're going to view it in the long term.
Yeah.
If we don't talk about that, you know, we're setting everyone up for failure. And if you don't know what feels good for you, well, someone else isn't going to necessarily discover that for you. If you find someone great, But, it's why it's so important that we know our own bodies and what feels good to us, that we can actually help our partners experience the pleasure too.
100%.
Like it's not just, I think often one of the things that I hear a lot about is like this ego of the man if you use a toy or you use a pleasure product. And like, how am I going to introduce it to my partner? And I'm like, why does it have to be instead of? And in fairness, I blame Samantha from Sex and the City for that. Like, I don't need no man. I've got my vibrator. I've got this rabbit. And it's like, but you could use it together.
Yes,
like you can explore your bodies together in ways that help both of you. That's not actually insulting to the other person.
100%. I was thinking about stories that I wanted to talk to you about, and there's I have a lot of male friends, given I have a background in information technology. So, and one of my friends who was very excited was telling me about a new girlfriend that he had, and that he'd bought her a little bit of a special something. I said, if you really want to make her happy, you should buy her a vibrator. And he's like, oh, I'm sure she's got one of those. And I'm like, wait, you don't know if she's got one of those? And he's like, why would I know? And I'm like, use it with her.
Exactly.
I was like, that's how you make her happy. I was like, use it together.
Exactly.
And he was older than he should have been to not know that.
Yeah. But it's amazing how people don't. You know what I found incredible? I try to give people forums where they can contact me and ask questions and things like that.
That's great.
And I've had so many men emailing me saying, like, my wife has really experiences really bad pain. Is there anything you can suggest or any tips that you can say, like, that would help? I really want to be supportive and understanding. And I'm just like so in awe of these human beings who drop your ego on the side. It's all about her, and let me, they're taking the time to send a message to a complete stranger to ask how they can help their partner have better sex. I'm like, this isn't just, as much as I'm a women-led business and it's all about women, I'm like, if we can educate men along the way as well, like, 100%. Amazing.
I'm curious, have either of your kids started sex ed at school?
Not yet. So my oldest is 8.
Okay.
It's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. So it's changed a lot.
Yes, so I hear.
Yeah, not as much as I'd like it to, but it's definitely, they're starting to talk more about both parties having pleasure and enjoying themselves, and a lot around consent.
Yes.
And making sure that you want to do it and things like that. So I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting, 30 years from now to see how this generation's been brought up. And, you can already see the younger generations quite confident, or much more confident in not necessarily their bodies, but in sexuality. Like when I spend time with 18-year-olds, they're definitely more comfortable talking about things than when I spend time with the 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. So a little bit of a mix, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think, obviously time changes things, but we can keep getting better. And what would you like to see? You said you think you'd like to see there be more, but what would you like to see change in the future?
I just think more around feeling good. I think also really understanding anatomy.
Yes.
Like we don't go into, and it's interesting, even studies now on the clitoris, things like that, we barely know anything about it from a science perspective because it's only been quite recent, to your point earlier, that we're even studying it.
Yes.
And it's the only kind of organ in the body that's just for pleasure.
Yeah.
Like they haven't found another reason for it yet. So that's kind of amazing. And it's like it was specifically put there so we could have a good time, which is awesome because we have to go through so much other pain. It's like,
oh my gosh.
Good. Nice trade-off. But I think, more around anatomy, more around this concept for me around explore and play. Yeah. So that's a really big theme in my business, but just in general, like just play and see what feels good and spend time getting to know your body. And
doesn't have to be so intense and serious.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what ends up happening is like we lose the fun. You think, when you're initially with someone, you like can't wait to get into bed and it's very fun and cheerful and playful, and you're you're touching each other and you're spending all this time getting to know each other's bodies. It'd be nice to, first of all, spend that time with ourselves, getting to know our own bodies. Yeah. But also bringing that in throughout a relationship.
Yeah. Oh, then you bring your cheat sheet to your relationship.
Exactly. So that would be good over time.
Yeah, I think we're getting better. And from the reading that I've done, I mean, the changes have already started to make massive statistical differences in sexual assault, in teen pregnancies, in a lot of these kinds of issues. And I think that's great, and that can only get better. And we need to make it get better. We need to make it better for the next generation. One of the biggest challenges that first came to mind for me is that women who are in touch with their sexuality or enjoy sex or dare mention that they enjoy sex are sluts and whores and asking for it, and all the plethora of awfulness, which, I mean, if you're taking on slut as a term of endearment, then more power to you, and I love that some people are doing that, but the negative connotation of it is
completely
like, even that girl's wearing short shorts, what a slut.
Exactly.
What?
Always. I know.
Buy her clothing.
It's nuts.
It's actually insane. Is that, do you know what, at 8, your daughter, is that coming around? Because I feel like that's younger and younger.
Oh, honestly, even I just recently had an experience. We were on holiday, and she's got a matching bikini to her little sister, and she put it on, and I was like, amazing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she went quiet. She's like, I'm going to change into my full piece. And I said, why? And she's like, I don't want anyone to see my tummy.
Oh.
And I was just floored. Yeah. And I'm not someone like, we're a naked household. Yeah. I'm really encouraging of,
good on you.
You know, just be on it. And I said to her, I'm like,
in your body.
I said, this has just, I'm like, as your mom, this hurts so much. I said, because you're beautiful no matter what you are, no matter what you look like. And I said, and I want you to feel comfortable. And I'm not going to force you to wear it, because that's, you know, that's the opposite of what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I said, I really want you to feel comfortable. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wear my bikini the whole day. Like, I'm going to walk around Byron Bay. I'm not going to put pants on. I'm not going to put thongs on. I literally, we went to the beach and we walked all the way back through town, and and in fairness, I actually inside was like, struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but I was like, I'm going to do
that's
this.
exactly what you need. Good
it
job. I'm so impressed.
But I think it is happening younger and younger. And also even for me, I find I'm really conscious of that line.
Yeah.
And then I catch myself and I'm like, I want to wear a dress, and I'm like, oh, it's a bit short and it's a bit tight, or it's a bit this. And I'm like, why do I care?
Yeah. Do I like it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think we're so used to looking at it through the male lens, and not even just the male lens, also from other women.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how often do we tear each other down because it's the other woman sitting there that's saying to someone, oh my God, did you see that slut, what she's wearing, or she's asking for it, or she's doing something. So I think we've got a long way to go to build each other up.
Yeah. And
just start to say, you know what, if that person's comfortable and happy, good for them.
Yeah.
And just stop, full stop.
Yeah. And I think like a part of all of these issues is media representation. And
Completely.
I think we touched on Bridgerton. It's starting to get a bit more of an idea from the female perspective is amazing. Something that I love and I've tried to take on board is from Booksmart. Have you seen it?
No.
So it's about 2 girls who are finishing high school in America, and they're best friends, and this plot line that's irrelevant to what I'm going to talk about. They do this thing where they like aggressively compliment each other. Like, I cannot handle you dressed like that. We need to get out of here. And they like have like a battle of the compliments in like an aggressive way. And I just thought that was wonderful. And I'm like, so everybody should bring that into their lives.
We have to be just comfortable in our bodies, and what feels sexy to one person won't to another person, but it's not about anyone else. It's 100%. Just like, I'll never forget, like, I'm someone, for me, I there's certain things that make me feel good. So if I get my hair done, I walk out of a hairdresser and I feel like $1 million. And I remember a hairdresser saying to me, she's like, you can wear jeans and a t-shirt, walk out and feel like $1 million.
Yeah.
You could buy a $1 million dress and not feel as good. And I was like, for me, that kind of resonates. Maybe not with someone else. I'm like, let's just do what makes us feel good. Let's try to focus on what we like. And it was interesting. I think that's what really struck me when I was talking to my daughter, because I'm like, I don't ever talk about weight or size or anything like that. I talk a lot about eating healthy because I have diabetes. So for
very
me,
relevant in your life.
Eating healthy is important, but also having treats is equally important. But, I really try not to do that. But I'm like, we have to think about what world do we want our kids to grow up in. It's actually not about us. And 100%. I think if we start to think about that more, we'll all start to be a little bit more kind and 100%. Forgiving of ourselves
100%.
And everyone else.
being realistic about the fact that some people do have these self-conscious issues. I think a really cool point that you mentioned to me before we hopped in here was about doing what makes you comfortable. If turning off the lights means you're going to be able to relax
exactly
and have a good time,
go for it.
Do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just, you know, I think we all have something that makes us feel good. Like everyone's got a something.
Yeah.
So just do that something. Like just go with it and, you know, try and find the right person. Like if someone else is bringing you down, walk away from it.
Yeah.
You know, but I think a lot of the time it's actually with us. Yeah. And if we started to feel a little bit more confident in ourselves and able to voice our opinion and ask for what we wanted, you'll probably get it.
Yeah.
Like you just have to ask.
Yeah.
But you have to spend the time with yourself to know what you want. And I think that's the piece that's missing at the moment.
Yeah.
We don't spend enough time doing that for ourselves.
Yeah. And I think if you have a partner, just tell them and they'll probably be fine with exploring it.
Exactly. I mean, you know, good, healthy relationships are all about communication. Like, sex is not, and I say this all the time, it's actually not about the physical. Like, it's not, a human being's not good at sex because they've got a certain body.
Yeah.
They're good at sex because they communicate, because they enjoy it, because they tell you what they want, they listen to you.
Yeah.
That's actually the foundation for what makes good sex. So the more you talk about it and figure out what you like, or at least, if not actual talking, like non-verbal talking, like moving hands around and doing things, that's what's going to make it amazing.
Yeah.
But, you know, this notion that a human being is either good or bad because of a physical attribute, it's a complete fallacy.
Yeah. While this series we're talking about modern Australian women, I also do want to touch on the charity initiative that you have. Obviously not as big of an issue in Australia, but there's sex trafficking issues globally.
Yeah.
And how your products, a percentage goes to charities that are helping prevent that.
There were lots of reasons I wanted to start this brand. And it was partly because I wanted to design the products, and it was also because I wanted to build a brand, and I wanted to help empower women to understand their bodies. And then I always wanted to be able to give something back. I'm a big believer that in anything in life, there's always an element where we can do a little bit of good for the world.
Yeah.
And when I started researching about pain during sex, the statistics around sexual assault, sexual abuse were unbelievably significant. It was like 1 in 5 women have had some form. Yeah. It's often a precursor to why you have pain during sex. Because you've had a negative experience, your body remembers it, and you create a physical response to it. And so when I started looking into that, I was like, well, what could I do about that? And I wanted to find a few different charities kind of all over the world that were doing different things that work to stop sex trafficking. So I think part of this problem, you know, we talk a lot about slut and we talk a lot about shaming and all these things, but so much of that is also tied up in sexual abuse, sexual harassment on both ends of the spectrum. So there's women that get trafficked, things like that, and then there's women that choose to be escorts or choose to be sex workers that love it. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, in this world where people are being trafficked and that, what could I do? And there were just some amazing charities that do different things, from sometimes trying to prevent it, but then there's a couple, and the Zoe Foundation's one of them. They really help women that have experienced some form of sexual abuse or been trafficked to rebuild their lives. Yeah. Because it's one thing to say, let's stop it, but then what does this human being do afterwards? We
need the solution. Yeah.
Exactly.
We need more education in those areas. And we need,
and create a life for them, like give them an alternative, because you're coming out of these horrific abuse stories of people that feel worthless, often don't have families and things like that. And then we have to create a better life
if they don't have another option. Yeah.
So it was really about, you know, you've got to break the cycle. Yeah. And so I found these charities, and I just think, you know, I'm never going to change the world on it, but you know, you said it earlier, if we're not part of the solution, if we're not willing to do something, it's never going to change. Yeah. And if every single human being would just do a little bit, we might be able to stop or at least help some of these people. And so in whatever way, I'm like, I loved the idea that from all these women experiencing pleasure, that we could help change the way that sex had been kind of construed to someone else through circumstance as well, and try to make that a bit better. Yeah. And I liked the synergy of that and just being able to do just a little bit in that space.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I think I love all the points that you've made, and what seems to be the consistent is communication in
Always.
pleasure, in educating children, even on the other scary scale of sexual abuse against children. If they understand what it is, and they know to tell their parents that it's wrong, they know to not believe predators.
Absolutely.
Imagine the difference that would make. And I think communication seems to be the number one take out of this, is talk about it.
Absolutely.
Talk to your friends about it. I mean, if you're uncomfortable, just dip your toe in, and someone that you're really, really comfortable with, maybe try it out, you think?
Absolutely. And there's so many different forums for it, and you can be anonymous, right?
Oh, yes,
you don't
of course,
have
start
to
anonymously.
If you don't want to talk to your best friend, cool, but go on the forum, just read things, but there's this whole world out there that I agree, like, we can all help each other if we just open up the conversation.
Thank you so much for talking to me. This has actually been great.
Such a great chat.
Thank you. I've loved hearing everything from you, and I could keep going for several hours, but I should probably let you go.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and it's been awesome chatting to you, so thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.